Okay, so let's unpack this. We have all been there, right? You're watching a movie or reading a book, and you hit that moment.
Oh, the dreaded plot hole.
Exactly. You know the one where a character does something that just completely contradicts the rules the story set up like 5 minutes ago.
Right, it totally breaks the immersion. You just stop trusting the narrator because the internal logic falls apart.
Yeah, I mean, why didn't the Eagles just fly the ring to Mordor? Or why did the time travel rules in that one superhero movie make absolutely no sense?
It usually feels like a mistake,
I
like the writers backed themselves into a corner and just kind of shrugged it off.
Totally. But today, for you listening, we are jumping into what might be the oldest and arguably the highest stakes plot hole in history.
It really is.
We are looking at a contradiction buried deep in the ancient Hebrew texts that, on the surface at least, looks like a total narrative collapse. It looks like a dead end that should logically break the central promise of the Bible.
It really does look like a trap. If you read the text superficially, you end up with a promise of an eternal kingdom on one hand,
Right.
and then a specific ironclad legal curse that guarantees that kingdom can never actually happen on the other. It's a complete paradox.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting. Our sources today suggest that if you look closer, like really close, looking at the fine print of ancient dynastic law, it's not a mistake at all.
Not even a little bit.
It is actually a brilliant, incredibly complex legal workaround. We are talking about a cosmic loophole that solves a 600-year-old problem.
It is essentially a masterclass in ancient genealogy and law. It weaves together history, biology, and legal rights in a way that honestly feels less like a religious text and more like a courtroom thriller.
I love that. So welcome to the deep dive. Today's mission is to solve the mystery of the impossible king.
The Impossible King.
We are looking at two ancient kings of Judah, Jehoiakim and his son Jehoiachin, and a curse that was supposed to end their family line forever.
And we're going to see how that curse clashes head-on with the ancient promise of an eternal dynasty for King David.
Right. We need to figure out how the source material reconciles this dead end in the royal line with the eventual genealogy of Jesus, because it involves curses, a virgin birth, and this massive distinction between legal rights and biological DNA.
It really does. And to understand the solution, we first have to really feel the weight of the problem.
Yeah, let's set the scene.
The problem starts with a very specific, very harsh judgment. We are looking at the final days of the kingdom of Judah. This is around 600 BC.
And things are going poorly, right?
Very poorly.
Yeah.
The Babylonians are literally knocking at the door, and on the throne we have King Jehoiakim.
So what do we need to know about him?
Well, the sources paint a pretty grim picture. He wasn't exactly a model leader.
Understatement.
Right. The text describes persistent rebellion, both politically against the Babylonians and spiritually against God. He was corrupt, he was oppressive, and he just completely refused to listen to any warnings.
And because of this corruption, the prophet Jeremiah delivers a verdict. I have it right here in my notes from the source. It's found in Jeremiah 36.30. It says of Jehoiakim, he will have no one to sit on the throne of David.
Which is devastating.
It seems, I mean, that's pretty final.
It is a severe disciplinary judgment. It effectively says, your branch of the family is done, the crown stops here,
Oh, wow.
but it gets worse.
Of course it does.
Jehoiakim dies, and his son takes over. His name is Jehoiachin, but the text sometimes refers to him as Coniah or Jeconiah.
Okay. Just so we're tracking the names.
Right. And Coniah Jehoiachin doesn't fare any better. He only rules for 3 months before surrendering to Babylon. But the judgment pronounced on him is arguably the final nail in the coffin for the entire monarchy.
I want to read this specific phrase from the source because the wording is the key to this whole puzzle.
Go for it.
The text commands, record this man as childless, a man who will not prosper in his days.
That phrase, record him as childless, is the absolute center of the controversy.
So wait, does that mean he didn't have kids? Like physically, biologically?
No, and that is a crucial distinction. The historical record and even later parts of the text list his children very clearly. He definitely had biological offspring.
Okay, so then why say childless?
Because the text goes on to explain what childless means in a legal sense here.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me read the rest of it. It says, for no man of his descendants will prosper sitting on the throne of David or ruling again in Judah.
There it is. That is the embargo. It's what scholars often call the blood curse.
The blood curse.
Yes. It means that while he can have children, they are legally disinherited from the crown. If you carry the blood of Jehoiachin, you are barred from the family business. You cannot be king, period.
Okay, so let's pause and look at the massive tension this creates, because this curse creates that plot hole we talked about at the top of the deep dive.
Exactly.
On one hand, you have this curse saying the line ends here, no more kings from this family. But on the other hand, you have the Davidic covenant.
Right, which is the absolute bedrock of the whole narrative.
Hmm.
Generations earlier, God makes a promise to King David, who is Jehoiachin's ancestor. He says, I will settle him in my house and in my kingdom forever.
Forever.
Forever. It's a promise of an eternal dynasty.
And then you also have other promises, like the one about a righteous branch being raised up for David. So you have a promise that David's line will rule forever, and a curse saying David's current line can never rule again.
That is the paradox. It looks like the tree has just been chopped down. If the royal line passes through Jehoiachin, which historically it did, and his descendants are disqualified, how can there ever be a son of David who claims the throne?
It feels like an impossible logic puzzle. If you follow the rules of the lineage, the Messiah has to come from this line. But if the Messiah comes from this line, he's cursed.
Exactly. If he is a descendant, he is disqualified. If he's not a descendant, well, he isn't the heir, so he is also disqualified.
It's a classic catch-22. It's like you can't get the job without experience, but you can't get experience without the job.
That's a great way to put it.
In this case, it's you can't be king without the bloodline, but the bloodline physically prevents you from being king.
Unless there's a third option.
A third option.
Yes. But before we get to the actual solution, we need to clarify the scope of this judgment. Our source material makes a really important distinction here that we can't miss.
Which is?
The distinction between a specific branch and the whole tree. The source argues that the curse was a disciplinary judgment on a specific, corrupt segment of the line, namely Jehoiachin and his immediate seed.
Okay.
It wasn't a cancellation of the entire overarching agreement with David.
I really like the analogy used in the source notes for this. Cutting off a diseased branch doesn't mean you're uprooting the whole tree.
That's exactly it. The covenant with David was unconditional.
Mm-hmm.
But the specific individuals ruling at that time, they were cut off. And historically speaking, we see this actually play out.
Right, because the text specifically says no descendant would rule again in Judah. Did that actually hold up historically?
It did. It really did. After the Babylonian exile, the people eventually returned to Jerusalem. And they even had a governor named Zerubbabel, who was a direct descendant of Jehoiachin.
But was he king?
No, that is the key detail. He was just a governor under the Persian Empire. He never sat on a throne. He never wore the crown. The monarchy, as a sovereign political institution, ended right there with Jehoiachin.
So the curse worked. The monarchy completely shut down.
Yes. For 600 years, there was no king from the line of David sitting on a throne in Jerusalem. The royal line just went underground. It was totally dormant.
Which brings us to the New Testament. And this is where the plot really thickens, because suddenly we have Jesus of Nazareth claiming to be the Messiah, the King of the Jews, the Son of David.
And to make a claim like that in that culture, you need receipts. You need to prove your lineage.
Right, and this is usually the part where readers' eyes just glaze over the genealogies, the long list of so-and-so begat so-and-so.
Oh, yeah, people skip them all the time.
But our source points out that this is actually where the aha moment is hiding in plain sight.
It is. Because we don't just have one genealogy, we have two. One in Matthew chapter 1 and another in Luke chapter 3. And if you compare them side by side, you'll notice something that has bothered scholars for centuries.
They are different.
They are very different.
They trace completely different ancestors.
That's correct. Let's look at Matthew's list first. Matthew traces the line from David through his son Solomon and down through the reigning kings of Judah, eventually leading right to Jehoiachin.
Wait, the cursed guy.
The cursed guy. Matthew includes Jehoiachin. He lists him as Coniah, right there in the family tree of Jesus.
Hold on. If Jesus is descended from Jehoiachin, doesn't the curse apply to him? No man of his descendants will prosper sitting on the throne.
That is the trap. But you have to ask, why does Matthew use this specific line? The source argues Matthew is establishing the legal line. By tracing the line through Solomon and the reigning kings, Matthew is showing who holds the actual title deed to the throne.
Okay, so this is about royal succession. If you want to be king, your name legally has to be on this list.
Exactly. You cannot be the legitimate king of the Jews unless you are a legal heir of this specific lineage.
So Jesus needs to be in this line to have the legal standing to be king, but being in this line puts him right under the blood curse.
Precisely. The legal line is a dead end because of the curse on Jehoiachin. But then we look at Luke chapter 3.
Right, the second list.
Luke traces the genealogy differently. He goes from David, but instead of going through Solomon and the kings, he goes through another son of David named Nathan.
Nathan? I honestly didn't even know David had a son named Nathan.
He did. But Nathan wasn't the king. He was just a royal son. He never sat on the throne. So Luke's line bypasses Solomon. It bypasses all the kings of Judah. And crucially, it bypasses Jehoiachin entirely.
So the line in Luke has no curse on it.
Correct. And this is widely considered by scholars and emphasized in our source to be the physical line, the blood descent.
Okay, let me make sure I am tracking with you here.
Go for it.
While Matthew traces the line of Joseph, the legal father, Luke, is tracing the line of Mary, the biological mother.
You've got it. We have two tracks.
Okay, so track A is Matthew. It is the legal right to the throne. It goes through the kings, but it's completely blocked by the curse on Jehoiachin.
Right.
And track B is Luke. It's the physical blood of David. It goes through Nathan. It's totally clean, but it has no claim to the throne because Nathan wasn't the king.
Exactly.
So we still have a massive problem here. If Jesus is Joseph's biological son, he gets the legal right, but he inherits the curse. If he's only Mary's son, he has the clean bloodline, but he has zero legal claim to the throne because royal rights pass through the father.
And this is where the source material points to the virgin birth as not just a theological miracle, but an absolute legal necessity.
A legal necessity. Okay, explain that. How does that work?
Think about the actual mechanics of it.
Yeah.
The text says Jesus was born of Mary, but not biologically of Joseph. However, and this is vital, Joseph marries Mary and officially names the child.
So
Legally, Jesus is Joseph's adopted son. And in ancient Jewish law, and frankly in most dynastic laws of the time, an adopted son had the exact same inheritance rights as a biological son.
So by being Joseph's legal son,
Jesus acquires the legal title to the throne of David. He steps right into the royal line of Matthew. He has the undeniable right to rule.
but because he isn't Joseph's biological son.
He completely avoids the blood curse of Jehoiachin. Remember the exact phrasing of the curse. No man of his seed or his physical descendants will prosper. Jesus is not the physical seed of Jehoiachin.
That is wild. It's literally a loophole in the contract.
It's threading a needle perfectly. He gets the legal credentials from Joseph, but he gets his actual biology from Mary.
And since Mary is physically descended from Nathan,
He is still biologically descended from David.
so he is truly the seed of David according to the flesh via Mary, but he is also the heir of David according to the law via Joseph.
Yes, and he manages to do both without ever hitting the tripwire of the curse on Jehoiachin.
It's amazing. It effectively creates a scenario where the curse stands. No physical descendant of Jehoiachin ever ruled. But the promise to David also stands because a legal heir, who is also a clean blood descendant of David, claims the throne.
And this explains why the virgin birth is so central to the narrative structure of the text. You take that away, the whole dynastic claim collapses.
It falls apart.
Without it, you either hit the wall of the curse or you lose the legal claim to the throne. You need both lines to converge in this very specific, non-biological way.
It's amazing to think that what looks like a glaring contradiction to us, these two conflicting genealogies, is actually the exact solution to the problem.
It creates a complete airtight picture. One line provides the right, the other provides the reality.
And it brings us right back to that promise in Jeremiah 23 regarding the righteous branch.
Right, let's revisit that. Because Jeremiah, the same guy who delivered the devastating curse, also delivered the promise.
Right. Immediately after pronouncing judgment on the wicked kings, God says, I will raise up for David a righteous branch. Why use the word branch?
The Hebrew word there implies a fresh shoot growing out of a stump. The imagery is really profound. The tree of the monarchy had been cut down. It looked totally dead. The line of Jehoiachin was just a stump.
But a new shoot comes out.
Exactly. And not just a continuation of the old, corrupt, diseased wood. A fresh start. The source argues this wasn't about simply restoring the failed political monarchy of Judah. It was about raising up a completely new kind of king.
That's a key point, because if the Messiah just came back to do the exact same thing Jehoiakim did, playing politics, fighting border wars, what's the point?
Right. The term righteous branch suggests a king who reigns in wisdom and justice. Our source highlights that God kept his word of judgment perfectly. The corrupt line never ruled in Judah again. The political entity known as the Kingdom of Judah ended.
But he also kept his word of promise.
Yes. The Davidic line was preserved for an ultimate, eternal kingdom. It's a much larger kingdom perspective. The Messiah doesn't just sit on a throne in a palace in Jerusalem playing local politics. He establishes a universal reign of righteousness.
So when we zoom out, How does all of this synthesize? Because it feels like we've gone through a lot of dense legal weeds here.
It resolves in three distinct ways. First, the curse was limited to a specific corrupt branch. It wasn't a total uprooting of David's line. Second, the mechanism of the virgin birth allows for a legal heir who isn't under the biological judgment. And third, the ultimate fulfillment is a total transformation of the kingdom itself.
It is an incredible display of consistency. I think what stands out most to me is the sheer precision of it. Like, if you were just making up a story or inventing a religion, would you really write yourself into a corner with a curse like that?
It seems highly unlikely. Why invent a curse that instantly disqualifies your main hero? Why create two different confusing genealogies that look exactly like a mistake until you analyze them with a fine-tooth legal comb?
It heavily implies that the writers, or the author, depending on your perspective, were playing a very long game. They weren't just inventing a simple fiction, they were documenting a complex reality.
And it tells us something profound about the character of the God described in these texts.
I think that's the most important takeaway for you listening. The source mentions that this entire paradox shows God's judgments are real. He didn't just say, oh, never mind, I was just kidding about Jehoiachin.
No, that line was definitively cut off. The consequences were real.
But his covenants are irreversible.
Exactly. He finds a way. The wisdom described here is the ability to weave judgment and promise together without compromising either one of them. He disciplined the sin, but he absolutely kept the promise to David.
It's not an either-or, it's a both-and.
Precisely. And that is often where the deepest insights are found, in the tension between two things that seem like they can't possibly both be true.
So we started with a plot hole.
Yeah.
We started with an impossible contradiction, a king who couldn't have an heir, and a dynasty that couldn't end.
And we ended up with a solution that uses legal adoption and biological descent to thread the needle perfectly. It really changes how you read those lists of names in the beginning of the New Testament.
Absolutely. They aren't just filler to skip over. They are the receipt. They are the proof that the puzzle was solved. They are the documentation of the loophole.
The fine print that saves the story.
Exactly. So, here's a thought to leave you with. We spent this whole time looking at one specific contradiction that turned out to be a brilliant lock-and-key solution. The source mentions that God's wisdom weaves both together.
It really makes you wonder.
It really does. If this level of specific, almost lawyer-like detail was required to solve a 600-year-old dynasty problem, what other apparent contradictions in the text might just be complex puzzles waiting for the right key?
That is a question definitely worth exploring.
Maybe a topic for another deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
See you next time.